In previous installments, we've delved into cases of enigmatic hauntings reported following high-profile tragedies and notorious crimes. This episode takes us to such a location, a deserted structure in Manila, once the site of a devastating loss of life, where the deceased's spirits persistently reach out to the living, eternally seeking assistance. In January 1981, the Philippine government announced substantial funding for an ambitious national media initiative. This concept, the brainchild of then First Lady Imelda Marcos, aimed to elevate the country's film industry on the global stage. The plan encompassed establishing a new international film festival, founding a laboratory for innovative filming techniques, and creating a permanent film archive. Central to this program's success would be a national media center, erected in the capital's heart, hosting all these individual elements. While many who reviewed the proposals were enthusiastic, concerns about projected costs and timelines soon surfaced. To remain within the $25 million budget and meet the new film festival's deadline, the media center's construction had to be completed in just 12 months. Dismissing her critics, project leader Betty Benitez announced the hiring of 4,000 laborers who would begin work on the media center immediately, operating in 3 shifts around the clock. The workforce threw themselves into the task, quickly silencing skeptics of the timeline. The building's main lobby, typically requiring up to 6 weeks to construct, was completed in a mere 72 hours. However, on November 17th, as the project neared completion, the perils of such a breakneck pace were brutally exposed around 3 a.m. Several newly constructed upper floors collapsed, along with their temporary supports. Hundreds of workers plummeted to their deaths, were crushed by falling debris, or impaled on jagged metal scaffolding remnants. The collapse resulted from a miscalculation in the amount of concrete poured that evening. As surviving workers rushed to help, a further danger emerged. The excess concrete, too heavy for the scaffolding, hadn't dried as quickly as expected. Many would-be rescuers found themselves trapped alongside their immobilized colleagues, as the concrete they waded through began hardening around their legs. Upon arriving at the site after the accident, Benitez swiftly ordered the military to cordon off the area, enforcing a total media blackout. It became clear her primary concern was resuming construction as soon as possible, rather than rescuing the dead and dying. When it became evident there was no quick way to free those trapped in the concrete, orders were given to remove them from the site by any means necessary. Trapped limbs were amputated, with laborers carried away screaming, rudimentary tourniquets failing to stem severe bleeding. Bodies deemed too difficult to retrieve were dismembered or simply left in place, quickly covered with fresh concrete. Despite an estimated 170 worker casualties, construction resumed with ruthless efficiency. Consequently, the center opened in time for its inaugural film festival in late January 1982. Attendees had little to no idea they were walking on foundations containing the remains of those who perished during construction. Almost immediately, rumors of mysterious occurrences during the film festival began circulating in the local community. Organizers received calls from female visitors complaining of dresses stained with what appeared to be wet concrete or in some cases blood. Despite thorough building inspections, no concrete weaknesses or secretions matching the dress stains were found. Additionally, ambulances were called to attend to guests suffering from temporary medical episodes. Several visitors reported overwhelming chills that briefly incapacitated them. Others experienced sudden, overpowering chest pressure, falling to the ground crying out about being trapped or pinned before symptoms rapidly subsided. These disturbing reports prompted Betty Benitez to arrange for priests to visit the site one evening after closing. These clergymen were tasked with identifying and neutralizing whatever was causing discomfort to festival attendees. The following morning, the priests departed, stating they had done all they could to appease the spirits of those who died during construction, but could not remain longer. Despite these issues, the center's inaugural film festival was later deemed a complete success, attracting high-profile celebrities globally. It sparked a massive expansion of the Philippines' film industry, with movies exported worldwide and several awards won by the country's actors. However, this success was short-lived when the government withdrew initially promised post-festival funding. The building was subsequently abandoned for extended periods, falling into disrepair due to poor construction techniques. Betty Benitez also fell victim to unexpected misfortune. One evening, while being driven home from her office, her car veered off the road and collided with a wall. When police arrived, the driver was found uninjured, but Benitez was discovered in the passenger seat, crushed to death by the vehicle's crumpled interior. A bizarre incident reportedly occurred during the inaugural film festival. After closing, as cleaning crews tidied up, armed men arrived, identified as members of the Presidential Support Group, conducting a sweep ahead of the First Lady's visit the following morning. Shortly after their arrival, a commotion erupted, and cleaners were herded into a theater at gunpoint. A headcount was performed, followed by demands for anyone playing tricks on government officers to come forward. Upon release, the cleaners glimpsed an agent being led off-site in distress. They later learned this bodyguard had been checking the building's lower levels when he spotted movement in the darkness. Challenging the figure, he saw a shadow flee and gave chase. The figure vanished through a closed door. Finding it locked, the agent radioed for backup, kicked it open, and found an empty room. Alone in the dark, his torch beam scanning the walls, the officer suddenly felt a freezing paralysis. Then, a disembodied, hushed voice whispered, "Too long," the Filipino word for help, directly into his ear. As more officers arrived to assist, they found their colleague backed into a corner, waving his arms, terrified. Following a major earthquake in summer 1990, the Manila Film Center was completely abandoned for years. During this time, local youth groups regularly explored the vacant theaters, searching for valuables left behind. One of the most chilling tales associated with the building involves such a group sneaking inside during daylight. As they ventured deeper into the media center's interior, they noticed the temperature dropping rapidly. Daylight from broken windows above gradually dimmed, until visibility was limited to a few feet. At this point, they noticed a viscous substance flowing down the walls. Moving closer, they realized in horror it was wet concrete, with wall panels seemingly melting onto the corridor below. As they turned to flee, a chilling scream made them look back. One boy stared in shock at the ground, where a human arm reached up through the solid concrete floor, its hand tightly gripping his leg. The disembodied limb was stained with dark blood, apparently sliced open with exposed gray bone covered in drying cement. Crying out in fear, the youth yanked free and fled with his friends. Only later, in sunlight miles from the film center, did they pause. The others watched in horror as the boy pulled up his jeans leg, revealing livid purplish bruises perfectly resembling a human handprint. It wasn't until late 2001 that the Manila Film Center was again used for entertainment. In December, a company called the Amazing Philippines Theater leased it for regular performances. However, rumors soon circulated that a new ghost had taken residence in the haunted building. Shortly after performances began, a young female performer's body was found on the building's steps. The police investigation was limited and unsuccessful, with detectives suggesting it was drug-related. Since then, an unknown female apparition has been repeatedly reported in and around the building. Occasionally, rehearsals or live shows were halted when performers complained of an unknown woman walking on stage, then vanishing. These sightings weren't limited to the building's interior. City taxi drivers reported similar incidents. On multiple occasions, cabs were flagged down by a local woman outside the center in the early morning, appearing to have minor injuries. The lone passenger, looking upset and intimidated, would ask to be taken to a hospital. However, during the journey, sometimes mid-conversation, she would simply vanish. Both during the Manila Film Center disaster and in subsequent years, the Marcos regime denied any workers were buried in the building's foundations. After their ousting from power, verifying these claims proved impossible due to a lack of trustworthy records. However, testimony from families of those involved and the few photos taken by journalists who accessed the scene suggest many laborers indeed lost their lives. The stories emerging from the building since its construction all point to the same conclusion: the brutality and horror inflicted on those dying in the incident by their employers was so incomprehensible that their spirits could never move on. They remained forever trapped within the concrete walls and foundations they worked so long and hard to build, caught between this world and the next, reaching out for the one thing they were ultimately denied: help.